Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Kuşadası, Turkey. Well, Kuşadası is one of our favorite resorts on the west side of Turkey along the Aegean shores. By the way, my name is Yusuf and I will be your guide today, and our driver's name is Ali. And our way to Ephesus will take about 20 minutes. But before we arrive at Ephesus, let me give you some information about our town. Originally, the name of town, Kuşadası, the Latin name is Scala Nova. That means new port. Because Ephesus we're gonna visit, once upon a time was a very famous port city. It was a commercial port of the Roman Empire. But because of the reasons, natural reasons, especially the river meander, bringing too much silt to the port of Ephesus, and the port of the city was totally covered up in this long time process. So after a certain time, the descendants of the Ephesians and those Latin sea traders like Genoese and the Venetian traders settled around here, and they tried to keep sea trade at this port. So during the 1480s, the name of Kuşadası was called as Scala Nova. So literally, Kuşadası means bird island. We have a little island right on the water, close to the port. Maybe you have noticed while you were approaching to our port. And in this time, there were lots of birds and pigeons nestled on the island. And the locals, Turkish locals living here, naming the area as Bird Island, which is in Turkish we call Kuşadası. So we drive to our Ephesus all the way to the south of the city, and on the way you can take photos and you can see those beautiful agricultural fields with different orchards like peaches and cherries and figs, and these are our major agricultural products all around that region. So once upon a time, Ephesus, as I mentioned, was a very famous big Roman province. It was the second largest Roman province of the Roman Empire. And during the time, Ephesus was also very famous with the Temple of Artemis, which made city very rich and important. And the temple, with its magnificent architecture, surrounding 127 pillars, and all the bases of the pillars with beautiful reliefs and the carvings, 100% made of marble. The huge construction today made this building as one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. So the temple dedicated to the mother goddess of fertility and hunt, called Artemis in Greek, Diana in Roman. So this was the main reason that Ephesus, all through the history in the ancient Greek and Roman era, became very famous and rich. The second importance of the Ephesus of that time was the port, because Ephesus was right on the water once upon a time, and all those boats, all those Greek and Roman and the Egyptian boats used to trade at the port of the city. Today, unfortunately, we are not able to see the port of Ephesus because of the natural reasons and a lot of disasters, especially the river running down through the valley, meander. So the river meander bringing too much silt to the port of Ephesus, and the port, the sea level was raised up by earthquakes, by the silt, and long time process as the port being totally covered. And after a certain time, there were no boats able to come to the city Ephesus, and after 800, 980s, Ephesus was totally left and abandoned. But another importance of Ephesus in history, also coming from the Bible. Well, Ephesus also mentioned as one of the seven churches in Asia Minor mentioned in the book of Revelation of John. So Apostle John and Mother Mary also during their missionary journeys been in Ephesus. As it is also mentioned in Bible, before Jesus Christ crucified, calling his mother and his youngest apostle John, and telling them that after me, here is your mother and here is your son. So between 39-40 ADs, Apostle John and Mary both were in Ephesus, because John had his mission to Christianize those Roman cities. And of course, when John came to the city of Ephesus with Mary, he saw the city, a big city, crowded, busy, and famous with the Temple of Artemis. But as he started preaching gospel on the streets of Ephesus, he was found out by the Roman soldiers. And it was a big crime at that time. How dare you try to change the religion of the Roman Empire? So by the Roman soldiers, John was arrested, and as a punishment, he was exiled from Ephesus, and he went to Patmos, one of the Greek isles. Patmos Island today is very close to our town, Kuşadası. Approximately 2 hours away from the port of Kuşadası, you can be on the Patmos Island. So on this little island, in a little grotto, where John lived approximately 2 years in this little cave, where he had his book of Revelation dictated and addressing 7 churches in Asia Minor. So Ephesus, as also mentioned in Bible, the letters to the Ephesians, is the same city that we're going to visit together today. So 2 years later, Apostle John came back to Ephesus. But when he came back to the city, he was in his 80s and he couldn't travel anymore. And it is believed that he died here. And by the early Christian Ephesians, he was buried nearby the city, right next to the Temple of Artemis. As we getting closer, I will show you where you can see the remains of the Basilica of St. John, which is dating back 600 ADs, that was built by one of the famous Byzantine emperors, Justinian or Justinianus, and his wife Theodora. And 10 years later, St. Paul, Apostle Paul, also came to Ephesus, and he settled in the city more than 2 years. When he came to Ephesus, he found Ephesus a very big commercial port. And he decided to live in the city, and he had a store in the agora next to the port. And he started making his family business, who was a tent maker. So when he remained in Ephesus for about 2 years, he used to come back and forth, and he completed his missionary journey. And he also, after John, Paul had a great intention being at the great theater of the city. And the great theater of the city you see just behind of us, which has got a seating capacity about 24,000 people. And Paul, he wanted to be in front of that 24,000 people to preach. But unfortunately, there were a lot of provocations going on against Paul, because they believed that the Ephesians and also those goldsmiths and the silversmiths believed that if Paul preaching every day at the theater and the Ephesians convert after a while, then there were no more business, and they would never buy those gold and silver shrines of Artemis, and they would lose business. And because of that, silversmith Demetrius, who was a very famous silversmith in Ephesus, provoking the Ephesians against Paul. And every day, the group of people under the leadership of Demetrius were at the theater and shouting out, "Greatest Ephesians of Artemis, greatest Ephesians of Artemis," and never let Paul to be in. Even Paul had lots of intentions being at the theater. He was all the time stopped by his friends not to be inside because of these provocations. So after remaining in the city more than 2 years, then finally he took boat and sailed to Rome. And on the way to Rome, he had a shipwreck and remained in Malta. Then after Malta, he was in his final destination, Rome. So Ephesus today, as you're walking on the marble streets of the city, maybe you're feeling yourself like one of the Roman citizens. Once upon a time, it was a great city and witnessed lots of events and historical events and religious events too. So right behind the theater, we also see that when it was built in the Greek era, it wasn't that big and large. By the way, Ephesus was not only a Roman city, but it was before settled by the natives. And then when Greek colonies came here after 400, 300 BCs, those natives and the Greek colonists met each other and tried to make a good business. But all through those years, they mingled each other, intermarried, and adopted the Greek language. And the Greek language became the spoken language of the city. But during the Roman era, when all those cities on the Mediterranean shores became the Roman Empire in the 2nd century AD, Ephesus considered as the 2nd largest province after Rome. Then the 3rd largest was Alexandria in Egypt, and 4th largest was in Antioch, because today it is in Turkey. Of course, we don't go that far, but we know that all those two important Roman provinces are located today, what we call Turkey. So the theater, when it was enlarged in capacity up to 24,000 during the Roman era, of course it was a place where the theatrical tragedies and comedies, religious and civic events, and the shows are arranged, was a magnificent place. And also, of course, Paul, because of that, wanted to be in the theater. Right in front of the theater, you see that long wide street, which is one of the longest streets of the Roman time, where the trade was going on and arriving at the port. And now we came to our final stop, and we are going back to the port of Kuşadası. And I wish you have a nice cruise all the way back home. Hope to see you again in Turkey, and we will be pleased if you visit us again. Thank you very much. Have a nice cruise all.